speaker. Today we have the fantastic Harrison Wheeler coming from LinkedIn today. We've seen all the news, heard about certain topics, and discussed with our friends and families about the current social climate. And as a design community, it's imperative that we continue educating ourselves and asking tough questions. Now, how can we do better? What does it actually mean to be an ally? And how do we incorporate this knowledge to create meaningful, diverse, and socially impactful designs? These are the questions that Mr. Harrison Wheeler is going to be addressing today, and we're so excited to have you. Harrison, without further ado, I'm going to let you take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, Julia. Also, shout out to Students of UXD doing big things. It's great to see those updates, and I know that I've actually bought the Articulating Design Decisions book for my whole team. So that's a super exciting event that you all should definitely be looking forward to. You know, I will say this, like timing wise, it's happening on a historic event. And I think it's ever so timely. It's always timely. And so today, like, you know, I want to kind of have a follow-up to the article that I wrote around, you know, the design community must not stay silent, because that's actually been something that's been near and dear to me and thematic throughout my experience. And so today I'm going to kind of share that with you. But it's not going to be a one-directional experience. It'll be an interactive experience. So I will kind of speak on some topics for, you know, the first, you know, 15 minutes. And then we'll kind of go into breakout sessions. We'll have a discussion as a group, and then we'll open up the floor to any sort of Q&As that you all may have. Sound good? Let me know in the chat. All right, so let me go ahead and get the screen shared. Give me 1 second. All right, everyone sees my screen? Perfect. All right, so again, my name is Harrison Wheeler. I'm a design manager at LinkedIn. You know, I've been in UX design for about 8 years. However, my experience goes way back to when I was 12 years old. I started coding when I was a young kid. And it's funny when we start having like career conversations and all those types of things. You know, I'm fortunate enough to say that my mom was my first manager. I was a webmaster at the elementary, or at the year-round elementary school that she worked at. And so it was a summer job. I got paid like $6.50 an hour. So, you know, compared to all my friends, I was balling. Not really. I don't even know what I did with that money. But it was a great experience. And it was one of those, one of the first times like I really got to understand what building something and seeing people interact with it, what that could turn into. And so that was something that really kind of propelled me throughout my career. So, you know, I was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is in the Midwest. I then went to University of Iowa, where I majored in graphic design. And then I pivoted into UX design in Chicago when I worked at a startup company called Base CRM, which ended up moving to California. I worked there for about 4 years, and then eventually it got acquired by Zendesk. So beyond that, now I'm at LinkedIn working on one of our enterprise tools. So you all use LinkedIn probably on a daily basis, and when it comes to messaging and posting things, but we actually have a very big business across 4 lines when it comes to LinkedIn Learning, marketing solutions, sales solutions, and recruiter. So there's a lot of business applications there. And so, you know, for me, I've always sort of wanted to understand, how do you scale design, right? When it comes to managing, when it comes to obviously having a user base of like 800 million users globally. How do you scale from a design systems perspective? But I think ultimately, how do you scale culture, right? There's a lot of sort of questions that come into play there. And so as I've started moving and progressing in my career as a manager, really I've started to think about dynamics of the team, right? And especially I kind of bring in my picture, because I think that is something that you should do. And I would probably say this year especially has been very important to just understand the connection between work life and home life, right? They're not exclusive, right? They're they're really integrated. And so how you bring yourself to work is also reflected in terms of the experiences that you have outside of work as well, right? So, you know, random fun fact, I actually have a stock photo. I don't know if you all have ever seen it, but it goes around the web quite a bit, and I've enjoyed seeing where it pops up. If you do a reverse image search, it's quite hilarious because it's on probably hundreds of thousands of websites, and it's doing exactly what I wanted it to do. I think about 5 years ago, one of my friends had built this stock photo website, and I was like, bro, let me get on that, because there are like no Black people. Obviously that's like changed quite a bit, but you know, it's working. So that's my gift to the internet. So I wanted to kind of start off with, you know, I'm starting off with an excerpt that came from the article. And what I'll do for you all, I'll actually go ahead and paste that in the chat here. Next personas. I've actually seen someone use that as a persona. And so, you know, as a designer, we refer to empathy, research, discovery, solutions, and success metrics on a day-to-day, but rarely we see that methodology applied to the world around us. And, you know, I think for me, like that really hits home, especially when we talk about your George Floyd, your Breonna Taylors, your Ahmaud Arbery's, and unfortunately that list is growing, right? And it's a result of a broken system. And, you know, I think one of the things that also sort of stands out is like, how does that make me feel? And, you know, one of the, like, there are a few words that really kind of come to mind for me, like grief, anger, sadness. And it's like, this is a situation that I have to go through to cope with it. And on top of that, I have to go to work the next day and be in, you know, an environment where no one talks about it. Right. And so, you know, you can't help but internalize this. And it's very unfortunate because there's so many outlying effects of this, right? It really has to change. And I realize if I'm internalizing these types of things, I cannot bring my best self to work, right? Because point blank, like, I'm very passionate about design. It has afforded me amazing opportunities, and other people should be afforded the same opportunities as well, all right? And so, as I mentioned before, when we start talking about belonging and inclusion, it's so important because you don't feel that. And here's sort of a few of those things that can lead to, right? It can lead to lack of trust, can lead to depression, imposter syndrome, anxiety, self-doubt, low performance in your job. And ultimately it can lead to career pivots, right? And so, you know, you might hear a lot of conversation about just hiring folks of color, people of color, but what are you doing to actually create an environment where they're going to stay, right? So we talk about retention. And so I want to kind of bring that out into 3 different layers, because I think a lot of times we really kind of think about this as, like, we look at it as a symptom, right? And so when you look at like the percentage numbers, that's really only one aspect. However, we need to start understanding, especially when we start thinking about things from a systems level, right? When we start thinking about things from an institutional level, I had started out with the personal piece, right? That actually has an effect on an organization perspective, right? So think about product releases. And then you're looking at it from an industry perspective, because now you do not have representation at the highest levels to help build that. So, you know, if we're looking at the numbers, I don't have them included here, but, you know, for Black people and people of color in general, unfortunately, you're looking at around between 2% and 6%, depending on how you slice the numbers in terms of representation, right? So a lot of times you're starting to look at it from a tech perspective. I believe AIGA released something and you're looking at a 3% number. So, you know, 3 or 6%, that's still not a lot. There's still a lot of work to do. And so when we talk about things that are happening at a product perspective, I have a few examples. And mind you, these examples only happen within the past year. So, you know, if we think about a lot of the corporate world that has started doing more initiatives around diversity and belonging, you know, we're looking at 2014, right? And here are some things that we're still seeing between 2019, 2020. And this really kind of goes along like the unintended consequences, right? So I have sort of 3 of these examples that I've highlighted here. So for instance, with Sweet Green. So Sweet Green their motto was connecting the world to healthy food or healthy food options, something along those lines. However, they went cashless, right? And so that locks out a whole group of the unbanked. Or when Google was working on their facial recognition features for the Google Pixel, because there was clear bias in terms of the recognition software, they ended up doing a research with Black and brown participants that were homeless and only paid them $5. Or if you think about Twitter. So Twitter, it's very interesting when you look at the move into COVID. A lot of companies were really trying to go to market very quickly with tools and applications. And Twitter had released audio tweets. However, even though they released it in record time, it wasn't an accessible feature. So people that were hard of hearing actually could never use that tool. And these are the small things that happen over time that are really reflective of the fact that there's not any representation. So please, you need to really understand that it is important to really bring up these types of issues because they do have, they have underlying consequences down the funnel, if you will. And I think most important, this is the most empowering thing that I want you all, at least if you can leave this, if all this goes over your head, if I'm boring you, if you want to celebrate. I know there's a lot going on, but I think this is a question that you should always ask yourself. How do we build a future that we envision? And I would say as this group collectively, right, you're surrounded by peers, right, that are going through this process together. And I think having conversations and understanding those things, what we'll have in a minute, is extremely important to start to recognize, okay? So that's really kind of like my task to you. How do we build a future that we envision? That isn't, and I think for me, that's something that's inclusive. I will provide you an example of what my mission is and sort of what has kind of come about it. So representation matters. And, the reason I say this, it's good for business. When we think about people bringing in folks from diverse backgrounds, perspectives come with that, right? Additionally, I want to talk about economic opportunity. These are conversations, again, that we don't have often. So I went to school at the University of Iowa, graduated in 2009. That sounds forever ago. I can't believe I'm 11 years. I'm looking into the window and reflecting, where did the time go? Back then I can remember looking at Apple keynotes and, oh man, the new iPhone, all that stuff, right? When it came to the design industry, it was very agency based, right? So what you've seen is a lot of those agencies have kind of moved in companies and they've kind of grown over time. And now they're into they're built into sort of the research and development process. But if I look at, the ceiling back then, it was a creative director at an agency. And, you were looking at maybe you'd break six figures, maybe. And that's like being in the game for years, right? And so now what you're starting to see is that a lot of these in-house UX design, the businesses are starting to recognize the value of UX design, right? Because it has a lot to do with the outcomes of their business. And so design collectively as an industry in terms of salaries has grown exponentially, right? You're getting engineering type of benefits in terms of salary, stock options, et cetera. And, when underrepresented groups do not have a part of that, they do not have the opportunity to build their own wealth or invest in their own communities. So this has a larger social impact to this, right? And so I think that's important for you all to understand when it comes to being able to express your voice. We cannot, we can't be, what is the word is? We can't be spectators to this, right? We have a responsibility. And I think it's important for you all to understand that you all have the power. And the reason why I want you guys to really understand that you all have the power is because I want to bring this example into what's on the top of all of our minds right now. Okay. So we just went through an election cycle and it happens every 4 years. And each and every single one of us who are able to cast their vote are be able to have a voice in the system. And if one of the things that we can at least take away from the past 5 days is that every single voice matters, every vote matters, right? And it's led to an outcome that can have extreme implications on our daily lives, right? I don't need to give you specific examples of what has happened over the past 4 years. I think it's at the top of your mind at all, of all of you all. And everyone has a different sort of perspective in terms of how that has reflected in their own lives. But it's important to understand that these things do affect us. Now, we don't see that change happening in the industry. In reality, because of that, we're seeing a system that isn't designed with change in mind, right? It's a great example of systemic and institutional bias around curriculum, access, and hiring practices. And this is not an exhaustive list, right? It goes on a lot longer. And so I think really kind of around this timing, I think it's important for you all to understand what can happen if you use your voice and you are able to exercise your power, okay? And design is a multidisciplinary process, right? And I'm gonna show you why. So we think about all of the different types of disciplines and different sort of areas of concentration. It's wide ranging. I can tell you that I've at least had conversations from recruiting around to typography, to prioritizing work, grid systems, moderating panels, user flows, mind mapping, design, user testing, hiring. But this one that I want to point to is advocacy, right? You know, you're advocating for people that may not be there. You're advocating for people that may not necessarily have a voice. Okay. So it's very, very important for you to really take some time and self-reflect. Like, I know that we get very caught up in the newest trends and all those types of things, but fundamentally, when it comes to advocacy and design fundamentals, like, they don't change, right? And so, look, I can tell you this. This is going to make me sound like a dinosaur again, but when I first started in UX design, we were using Photoshop and Dropbox. InVision wasn't even out, right? And some of you all probably never even used InVision. Then when Sketch came out, that was a game changer. And now we're on Figma and we're working together, right? So at the same time, we have a lot of these things that allows us to be more efficient in our work. However, fundamentally, things haven't changed, okay? So advocacy. So we're going to do a little bit of a reflection exercise. After we do this, we will then go Figma. After this, we will take some time to kind of reflect on this for a little bit, and then we'll move into our breakout groups, okay? And then we'll have that discussion. So there are really kind of 5 questions that I want you all to kind of think through. And really kind of like this first one is one that I want you all to kind of think of, right? And it's like, what is a notable experience that you had or witnessed in the past of not being included? So it could happen to you. You could have witnessed it. But how did it make you feel, right? Did it happen more than once? Do you think it happened to somebody else? What are some things you could do to change this? All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to be silent for the next minute. I want you guys to kind of reflect on this for a bit, and then we'll move into our breakout sessions, right? And you know, feel free to kind of have a conversation with your group that you're in, and kind of talk about these things. All right. So I'll give you a minute. All right. So I know that was only a minute. You can still take some time to think about that a little bit more. I would imagine that you could probably take these 5 questions and reflect on them, you know, after this. But you know, I think for me, I will actually go ahead and kind of answer these for you, just to at least give you guys an example of kind of maybe something of what this could look like. So as I mentioned before, you know, I think going into work and not feeling included and not having people to talk to, especially when going through these traumatic moments, I think for me was extremely defeating and extremely frustrating, because this is an industry that I advocate for every single day. And we hear a lot of, again, the empathy and all that, but I'm just not seeing it. And it's happened more than once. It's not a new thing, unfortunately. And of course, like it can happen to someone else. And I think at least right now I have the privilege of having coworkers that I can talk to about this, have the privilege to talk to you all about this. And so, you know, this is something that I'm trying to do to change this, right? And it's in many different ways. It's not a one singular approach to it. It's having conversations. It's thinking about hiring. It's questioning, you know, institutions of power, right? It's providing access. So I started a podcast, right? And building that platform to be able to communicate that. So those are just kind of some of the things, all right? And so as you all are going to go through your breakout sessions, and then even at home, think about what are some things that you can do to change, or maybe that you've witnessed from a personal, organizational level or an industry level, right? Because I think once you start to really kind of go outside of yourself, you may start to recognize that there is a larger pattern, right? And obviously from an industry perspective, we see this. So I'm going to go ahead and have you all go into your breakout sessions. Hold on, this is loading in super slow. People understand me. Very insightful to hear perspectives from other people. I feel like we all had something different and relevant to say. Communal, interesting. So eye-opening, I don't feel alone. Vera shared her inspiring story, how she's fighting to make product more accessible. I wish there were more Black men design leaders in Canada. Frustrating that there isn't some sort of quick fix, right? And so I think like what you're seeing, for one, everyone has different experiences, right? And I think it's important to respect those different experiences, right? But the underlying thing here is that we are all connected in some way, right? And there's a lot of work to do. I think one of the things that's actually very telling is that you all have identified extremely specific instances, right? And that's actually a very important realization to have, because there are many aspects to this. This is not a simple topic to discuss. It's not a simple topic to address. However, clearly identifying and understanding these things is really the first step that one can take, right? And so, you know, really when it comes down to this, when I talk about advocacy, I don't think about advocacy specifically that, you know, allies is the only people kind of working on this, right? It's also taking our experiences and reflecting on our own experiences, and also coming to the table with that as well, right? And so, you know, kind of what I want to close with before we open it up to Q&A is that we need to turn advocacy into action, right? You know, I will say a lot of the topics that we have discussed today are not different than discussions that I had in other groups, right, for years. And, you know, it's going to take every single one of us with our experiences to come to the table, and we got to keep our foot on the accelerator. We got to keep our foot on the gas, right? With as much energy that we do have talking about design systems or animations or interactions, it's important to make sure that we are going to make people feel uncomfortable, right? Because that's what happens when you break the status quo. So, you know, my thing is, this is a great conversation. It's only a start. When we start thinking about things at a personal, organizational, you know, institutional level, I want you all to kind of leave here and maybe kind of think about what are some things that we can do tomorrow? What can we do in the next week, the next month, the next year? And really kind of turn those things into action. And just understand, making just those small steps, somebody is going to see that, right? It's going to be that much more meaningful for somebody that may not necessarily have had the courage to stand up right away, right? So with that, I will conclude, and I will open the floor to any Q&A that folks have.
Awesome. Yes. So Harrison, my team and I will be, you know, sifting through the chat to see if there are any questions, and feel free, everyone, chime in. This is such a great and relevant topic. And I think that to begin, I have a question, Harrison, and my question is, what are the things that we should keep in mind when initiating conversations about inclusion, when you're trying to face, like, let's say like someone that's higher up or someone that's,
Yeah.
in a higher position of power than you? Like, what are just some key things to keep in mind? Because I know for me personally, it
Yeah.
can be very emotional, and like it can
Yeah.
sometimes like, can't you see what's wrong? But like, I'm
Yeah.
curious to know what you kind of have in like as a toolkit, so to speak.
Yeah. That's a very great question. And I'll go through sort of like anecdotal kind of example. Um, so, from a career perspective, like I'm very passionate about, managing and seeing my team grow. Right. And a really big part of, and this is another thing in that full on toolkit when it comes to design. One of the things that is extremely important is understanding how to have crucial conversations, right? And so, to me, when it comes to hard conversations that we can all probably identify with, can I get that promotion? Can I negotiate my salary? Right? And then on top of that, it's really kind of talking about subjects like these, right? And so I personally think from a design perspective, we kind of have it fairly easy in the sense that, um, you know, we have a mutual motivation of understanding people. That's at the core of what we do. And so that's sort of like that mutual agreement, right? No one can really debate that. And also at the same time, no one can actually deny your experience, right? And so one of the things that I think is going to be important, I think having role playing scenarios and really kind of talking through that, I think that'll help you start to have a little bit more composure walking those conversations, because I think there is an emotional side to it. And I'll put it like this: I've been in situations where I've been extremely emotionally charged, and I'm very passionate. However, things may not come out in the way that I would want them to, right? And so, again, this is a conversation that we don't have enough, but we should get in the practice of doing things more, right? Because when you have practice, you have a stronger voice and you have more confidence behind it. And so, what I would actually do is maybe kind of take a step again, really kind of think about some really profound moments in your life that have been very meaningful, and really kind of talk through those and start to bring those in, right? One exercise that I've been starting to do is thinking about a specific sort of instance in design, and then really kind of thinking about a life story, right? So I'll give you an example. So one example that I have, I say it takes a village, right? And this is an unfortunate circumstance for me. But when I was younger, um, someone broke in our house and stole a bunch of our stuff, right? And it was a very traumatic experience for me, because I think I was around 10 or 11. But out of that, the community came together. Like my dad's job donated a computer. My mom's coworkers donated a bunch of like computer hardware. And by the time I was able to get back on the computer, that's how I got internet access, right? And so the community that came together to make that happen for me played a very big part in my development early on, right? Because I understand the power of community. So that's kind of one example, but you should take those, really kind of think about those things and list them out, right? Because when it comes to any opportunity, preparation is important. But most importantly of all, I think for all of you, I want y'all to bring your best selves to the table, right? And I think those are the things that really help you stand out. And so let's think beyond, hey, I'm a UX designer. Let's think about all the things that have gotten you to this part in your journey.
That is really profound. And I'm like, I feel like we forget sometimes that our backgrounds are the answers. And it's like we just
Yeah,
like focus too much on deliverables as opposed to, why we're doing things. So I think that that's definitely something really, I'm just like thinking back now. I'm like, oh, what are all the experiences I've had and all of
yeah,
that. And that's great. That was a great question. And I think we have our last question before we wrap up from Emmanuel. In a world where different events happen and might affect everybody differently, what are some of the things you can do to help everyone feel included? So speaking to mental health to make sure that everyone is in a good state of mind for work and productivity.
Yeah, awesome question. I know this is something that I've been faced with during the mini phases of this year, and it's been extremely heavy. And I will say this, like in every experience that I have, I'm going to have a disclaimer to it because, as with any case study, it is due to the context of your environment. And I'm coming from a privileged position in being in a managerial role at a company that does invest in wellness, right, for their members. So, um, you know, there's a few different things. I mean, I think for me as a manager, planning is important when it comes to projects. So I try to make sure that my design team is not working on more than 3 projects, for example. And that empowers me to say no when, engineering and PM are trying to do more work, right? So you have to create guardrails because time at the end of the day, time is the ultimate, your currency here, right? And so you need to be extremely protective of that, all right? So everything starts with time. And then from there, I think one of the things that I've really tried to do is have make my make my team empowered to let me know if they're not doing okay or if they're not in the right mood to do this. And one of the things that I've generally found out by having that is that I've seen other team members pick up work for other and support them and vice versa, right? Um, I think there's a lot of tactical things. I mean, I don't want to get into the tactical too much, but one of the things that I think is extremely important is actually working more collaboratively and horizontal. So that means being on the same page with product, engineering, whoever you're working with. That's important because at that point now you all understand the challenges that you all are up against, right? And that'll empower you all to say, hey, we need to maybe kind of chill out on this. Is this the right thing that we need to solve given sort of the time and the mental space there? So there's a lot of things. Discussions, conversations are one. I think also when you all are working on your specific teams, I think a great tool that I love to use is a retrospective and bring those things up in the retro, right? Say, hey, look, I think our timeline's moving too fast. Like I'm getting burnt out, and that's okay. Start to talk to your manager. You need to be transparent with these types of things. All right. Hopefully that helps.
That does help. I feel like this kind of honesty and being able to look up to somebody that is being honest, I think that that's just like so important. And I love the fact that you mentioned that, on the teams that you've witnessed and managed, like if someone does need help, like people are more than happy to provide it. And I feel like something that's super great about like what I was hearing in the breakout rooms, like with the UX community, we're coming from different backgrounds and there's some more like just support in general that I don't realize that we had until now. So those are just really, really great insights. And Harrison, this was so good. I learned so much, and I'm sure that everybody else can say the same. Before we do our final wrap up, Vicky's going to go ahead and put up just a final slide. But Harrison, thank you so much on behalf of everybody here.
Yeah.
I don't know about you all, but I learned a lot, and I'm very excited to hear from you all what kind of takeaways that you had from this event. Make sure to let us know, tag us, tag Harrison. I'm sure we'd love to hear your takeaways and also your feedback. So as you probably saw, Donald put in the chat a feedback form. We always like to know how we as a team can improve your experience here at Students of UXD. So make sure to fill that out. And also, again, tag us Students of UXD on LinkedIn, but also on Instagram. We're also very active there, thanks to our social media coordinators. And again, for our next events, all very, very relevant socially as well, make sure to check Students of UXD. And with that being said, I hope that everybody has a beautiful weekend.
Yeah.
Stay safe out there. And Harrison, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Have a great weekend, you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you.